All right. I think we are live. Thanks everyone for joining another episode of the OpenJS Foundation Security Collaboration Space meeting. I'm going to drop this link, which I think is, I got an error, but I think that's the right link for the live stream. The notes here. Which reminds me, I will share the notes with folks here in the chat. Please add yourself. And of course, if anyone can help with note-taking, that would be great. Cool. So do we want to start? Are there any announcements to share? Other than we'll all be together, maybe not all of us, but some of us will be together next week. Yeah, wow. And I just had deja vu. That's weird. Cool. All right, well, we'll hang out next week. That's exciting announcement. Anything else before we get into the agenda? If not, the first thing that's on here is talking about audits. Thanks for joining, Amir. You want to take over?
But before Amir gets started, I do need to mention something. So I invited Amir to this meeting. And I did that because Michael Dawson had asked me to get some more information about audits in a GitHub issue. I did make a mistake, but I think it's a mistake with positive consequences. So Michael had asked me to invite him to security meetings, and I invited him to this meeting rather than the node security meeting. So I made a mistake and invited Amir to the wrong ones. However, that mistake does have positive consequences because we are moving forward with other audits. And Amir, maybe just a brief update for this team on where we are in the audits that we're currently, or we're starting to kick off would be useful. And then I can actually invite you to the right meetings afterwards. So apologies.
Good. Yeah, sounds good, Ben. Thank you. I mean, it's always a pleasure to see all your faces. So definitely not worried about being at the wrong meeting, but very happy to share that, yes, we did meet with Jordan, I think it was last week, to get the ball rolling with NVM, the NVM security audit. And we are feeling very good about having that done by the end of the year. Next update is with Fastify. We are meeting with Matteo next week on Monday. We have a meeting set, and thankfully we've got our audit team picked out too, and they will be joining in on that meeting to kick things off. Lastly, with Webpack, let me check, but I think I sent another kind of nudge email to get the ball rolling with that. Yeah, it looks like about 6 days ago.
Sean's been on vacation.
Oh, okay. That makes a lot of sense then. Do you happen to know when Sean will be back from vacation?
I believe today. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect. Well, that should work out perfectly fine because the team that we have that will be auditing Webpack, they are ready to start around mid-October. So that gives us about a month just to get kind of the preliminary information together and get all the info we need before we can dive in. But yeah, I'm happy to say that of the 3 audits that OpenJS has funded for this year, all 3 are moving. And I anticipate we'll have some results by the end of the year.
So a question for the Security Collab Space folks. When Amir talks about audits, do all of you understand what that entails or what the scope of those are?
I think it would be good to get into it, especially on the stream, so folks can reference back to this as well, if you don't mind, Amir.
Oh, no, not at all. Yeah, it's a great question, Ben, because yeah, we do see that there sometimes can be different definitions or perceptions on what exactly the security audit is. But the way that we do it with OSTIF is it's a very hands-on collaborative engagement where we will typically meet with the the lead developers, maintainers, contributors, get to know what their needs are and get a better understanding of the project, get an idea of its security posture, start to kind of put together an idea of, what can we do to help this project. We work together on gathering some information that we use to put together into a RFP or a proposal that we then put out to our big network of security researchers, experts, and these are all folks that are in the open source community themselves and are typically very open source centric. So we are working with folks who are more than willing to meet the projects halfway. And then once we get a good idea of the scope and what really the project needs and how it can benefit the most from what we can offer, namely what we offer is manual code reviews, security audit, reviewing the testing infrastructure and testing tools, seeing how that can be augmented, and really anything else that the project needs to improve its security posture. And so then, once we get a winning team with a winning proposal, we then connect the parties where the audit team then meets with the projects and they can get to work on executing on the audit. And we have found from our experience that the more collaborative these are, we typically get much better results. And that is our intention, is that it's not meant to be, a lot of folks think of an audit, someone just comes in and just like tells you everything you're doing wrong and doesn't help you in any way and just walks away. And our process is certainly not like that. We look at it as a collaboration. We have some folks who really understand security and how to improve the security of a project and are able to help the project directly fulfill those goals. So that was kind of in a nutshell, kind of long-winded way of explaining what we do, but I guess in a nutshell, it's very customized security resources that can directly improve the project.
Yeah, and I do want to reiterate on that last point there that the audits do include actually implementing fixes where appropriate. So actually writing code. And that, I think that's an important distinction, because oftentimes when you think of an audit, it's a set of recommendations, right? We've gone through all this stuff. Here's what we think you should change. This is a little bit more than that, right? This is
correct, yeah,
if appropriate, right? And it works with the project, like here's fixes.
Correct, yeah. For example, findings are reported to the project as they are found. Especially the more high risk or the issues that are looking like they have a higher risk classification. And then typically also will be provided are things like proof of concepts, root cause analysis, things like that really help address the issue. And yes, thankfully we have found that all of our engagements coincide with major fixes, releases, and remediation of those issues, as opposed to just a list of recommendations that, some recommendations can be more actionable than others. Ours are most focused on directly remediating any problems and improving the security posture.
Right. And so I know for the Sovereign Tech Fund, that's funding NVM, Fastify, and Webpack. We have other projects who perhaps are interested. The Node.js project is one who are looking at it as part of their badge program to get to the level they need. And if there are others who are interested, we'll just look at going out and trying to secure more like direct funding for those audits, whether through OpenSSF or others. So.
Awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, just some maybe contextual information. I can share the CNCF impact report that we produced. I believe this was at the end of last year. We'll be putting out another one this year as well. But it has a lot of good case studies for the work that we've done for folks who might want to get into a little bit more of the technical reading. And part of our process is releasing or publishing the results of this work, so that folks can have an artifact showing that the investment and the effort made into the security of the project. So all of those reports are accessible on our website as well.
Great, thank you all. Anybody have questions for Amir? No? All right, cool. Great, well, thank you. I look forward to hearing more as things progress. Cool.
Yep. Thanks, Amir, and I will get you on the right meetings shortly.
Of course.
But think of this as practice, right?
Yeah, exactly. Absolutely.
I appreciate it.
This is never the wrong meeting.
Yeah. And I know you're busy, and I know you mentioned about coming in at the appropriate time. If you're more than welcome to stick around if you'd like, if you have other stuff to do, that's totally fine as well.
Okay. Well, thanks again. I look forward to seeing you all in Bilbao for folks who will be there. And I'm also looking forward to syncing more and providing any updates and really any help that's needed from our end. So thanks again. Thank you, Ben.
Thank you. Take care. Cool. So moving on in the agenda here, the next item is issue 53, discuss request for information on open source software security, areas of long-term focus and prioritization. There hasn't been too much chatter in the last 3 weeks, so I don't know if there's any updates here or nudging or anything we want to do.
Ben and I have been working together offline, and we'll take a stab at something for you all to provide feedback on. So probably get that done probably after Bilbao, you'll see that.
Okay. Great.
Yeah, we've been moving forward.
Excellent. Ben and Robin put together a draft. Great. Next on the agenda is this is issue 50. Get feedback on draft OpenSSF CII best practices badge for JS projects. Had some comments last week. Jordan, do you want to update, or Ben, or anyone?
I don't think I have an update at the moment.
Okay.
I mean, I think we've gotten a lot of feedback, multiple rounds of feedback on this one. So I think this one's in really good shape. And I don't know, Jordan, if you're thinking about doing another feedback round or if that's post-publishing, but I feel like I don't want to say anything else. I want you to answer that one.
Yeah, I want to do another round of feedback on the badge doc in particular before I suggest to this group that it's ready for publishing, but it's very nearly there. And then once I've completed that, then I'm going to dive into the feedback on the other two docs and try and get them to a similar place. Perfect. So with any luck, it will be in the next couple of days. And so please be on the lookout for a ping on GitHub, or I may ping y'all on Slack or something.
Right.
To review it.
Awesome.
Chris, did you have a comment? I'm always watching.
Oh man, I need to turn my camera off. I was just going to mention that I was talking with David Wheeler a little bit about this last week, who is very much in favor of anything that comes out of that is suitable for the actual best practices like guide itself to like go to the upstream. He is very enthusiastic about. So just something to keep in mind. But I think he's given some feedback on this, or was going to. I'm not sure, but it'd be nice to have one guide to rule them all.
Yeah, it would, although I in practice, does that work? I mean, we have different needs for different projects, but I mean, I'm all for the idea for sure.
It is
Matt?
it is upstream, and people can augment the base generalized information with specific information as well if they want to, or in their repos they can point to the base information, augment it locally in their projects. So
Helps the scale, right? So,
Yeah,
Ultimately, I think it's more of a discussion for later. I think the path that what Jordan is doing, what he's going down is good. And I think, see what shakes out of that and see what makes sense to merge upstream or not when it's ready and good to go.
sounds great. Cool. Excellent. Well, moving on. The next item is this is 45. Why is my stuff not working? There it is. So this is create a prescriptive best practices tool chain. There hasn't been much comments on this in a while. I know, Ben, you started with a categories doc to get the ball rolling. And that's been
That
untouched.
ball seems to have not rolled.
Yeah.
To use the technical term.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know what are our thoughts on this. Is it we wait until some of these other docs come together and then focus on this, or what do people think?
I think that's probably I think that's probably a good idea. Like a lot of Jordan's work, I think would benefit from this type of deliverable, like something that ties all of those recommendations across the badges, across SBOMs, and is like, hey, here's kind of a real world example, and here's the tools that ties all this together and works efficiently. That's at least the vision, the vision that I see for this. Whether or not that's practical or not, I think is to be determined. So yeah, I mean, I also think that maybe this falls into some of the work that we plan out for the next quarter. Maybe like it becomes part of the Sovereign Tech Fund work. I think if done right, it makes a lot of that stuff easier to use, easier to implement. Yeah, just my thoughts.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's almost like a bit of implementation once we kind of figure things out.
Yeah.
Cool. All right, great. So we'll leave that one hanging around. Next up is the issue 17, the milestone compliance report audits dashboard created and populated by tier 2 projects. I see some recent commentary. Ben, you want to update the gang here?
Sure. So the idea here is to have a dashboard of OpenJS projects and their how they're doing across the criteria that we're coming up with for security, right? So do they have Jordan's SBOM recommendation implemented? What level of badging do they have? And hopefully a whole bunch of other criteria. So as like a V1, we're like, let's just make a spreadsheet, because honestly, like just figuring out what that criteria is more important than visually how it looks, at least in the beginning. So Jordan's taken a stab at creating an initial dashboard. And again, this is like, it's V.1, right? It's a spreadsheet. That's great. And I think the latest here was that I saw something from Nearform.
Yeah, I just posted in the chat.
Yeah. Which looks cool. I mean, it's pretty, right? So take a look at the link in the issue, but it's a nice, cool dashboard. And it's sort of like, you can see us getting to something like that eventually. I also, I talked to Jordan a little bit about this. I don't know if there's some potential collaboration we might have with Nearform on the dashboard. Might be cool for them, might be cool for us.
I also brought up that dashboard in the OpenSSF risk meeting last Friday, which is also trying to build a similar dashboard.
Yeah.
So I left it open-ended, kind of like use it for UI inspiration, and or it's open source, and it's kind of just pulling in scorecard data. So I don't know how much value there is to OpenSSF for the code, but the UI seems much nicer than some of the mockups, better UX rather than some of the mockups I've looked at. So it's hopefully they'll make each other better.
Yeah. And LFX at the Linux Foundation has a security dashboard. I think it was just, again, not quite V1 yet when we saw it, but they have, they use GitHub data, but they also have collaboration with Sneak. So if there's some Sneak, Nearform, what have you, you know, more the merrier, I would think.
Yeah, is this something that we should be working on? Or I guess, I mean, is this
I think
something
we
that
should be
5 different people
connecting the dots, so we're not
Yeah.
like recreating the wheel. That's not the really open source way, huh? So,
Yeah.
so why don't we kind of do some homework on our side and see what's happening.
Yeah. Okay, that sounds good.
Mhm.
Cool. All right. Where am I here? Great. So I think there's just one more issue here, which is another milestone. This is issue 18, SBOM generation tooling best practices created. There's been some recent commentary on this a couple weeks ago. Chris and Michael Dawson, Jordan.
Yeah, I probably owe an update to that thread. So Jordan and I were talking about this last week. And I'm glad Matt's on the call because I'm going to put Matt on the spot. In discussing SBOM generation for projects and what's the best way to do it and where should this be packaged, we found ourselves grasping at the question of what do they want from a project maintainer? Do you want anything from a project maintainer? So like, my question for Matt is like, do you want a project to generate an SBOM and like package it with the, you know, the tarball with the distributable? Does that matter?
Yes.
And but before Matt, you answer, Darcy has pointed out to me that the definition for SBOM means that a lock file satisfies it. An NPM lock file that has been like that you can easily generate for a decade has satisfies that definition.
Okay, I don't know. That's a great first step, but
But what would be the value of a lock file generated at a specific point in time? Because if you consume it a week later, that's a week worth of security issues or whatever that.
Multiple questions from multiple sources.
Yeah,
so
sorry, I'll let you answer
one at a time. First to Chris, yes, you should endeavor to create automation as part of your build process, both for developer build. Anytime you create a tag release, clearly, or perhaps enable scripts to do it on a per developer basis as well. If you create any not in an interim release stuff like that, you can. Those are two different concepts in GitHub. Yes, automation scripts should try to generate something. You pick the best tool for Python, right? And and have documentation that tells people how to run it. And it should be automated, as part of a pull request or part of a tag creation or something like that. Absolutely. And that's what I do for my project. Now, to Jordan's point. So I freely admitted on past calls that I generate an SBOM for my utility, and it just uses the Go mod file, which is equivalent to the package lock.json file, which only basically includes an SBOM that has direct first generation dependencies. So that's a starting point, but it should not be our recommendation level. Our recommendation level is to ask the tool to generate a transient dependency graph. Ideally, you want a full transient dependency graph resident in the SBOM manifest, because the whole point of it, use case one, is clear component identities of all your open source dependencies, no matter how far along the branches they are of your tree, your dependency tree graph, so that you can identify vulnerabilities. That's the goal. So you should, step one is get it automated. Start with package lock for sort of dependencies. That's where I'm at with my utility. And then figure out how the tool can be, hopefully there's a switch statement where it can actually go and search the dependency graph. And that's the goal of all major companies. That's what Guac was trying to do. Microsoft Ava was doing with their tool that's gotten a new name, Omnivore, I think it's the new name on it. Everyone's goal in security at the OpenSSF is to create a full dependency graph SBOM.
So especially given that an end user's node application can have NPM overrides, the things shipped in the packages are actually useless to tell you what's in your final node modules. You would always need to generate a lock file at install time of your application. And so when would you ever want to use an SBOM from a shipped package, given that that information isn't guaranteed to be accurate?
I'm not 100% following. So, I mean,
like I'm saying that you can dynamically alter a transitive dependency and replace it with another one in your application.
A lot of languages have that problem. Do your best what you can from this static information. The NIST declares 6 different types of SBOMs. I often say 5, but it's 6. So we're talking about a source SBOM. What you're talking about is a downstream SBOM, which is called perhaps I'll misremember the names that NIST uses. I hate them, but it's basically after it's installed in your system, there's another name for that SBOM, and there's also, so it's a source. Do your best you can at the source level. That's where everyone starts. Right.
So I think this is great information. I think I'm aware of the 6 types of SBOMs. I thought there were 7, but maybe 6. I don't remember. But a holistic description for the JavaScript ecosystem of what information, if right now with no one doing SBOM anything, I have a node application. What information do I need to generate all 6 of those SBOMs? And then where are the gaps? And asking, which of those gaps are something a package author can fill? And then what do they need to do to fill it? And then that question is the advice we would give the answer to that question is the advice we would give package authors. And that might be generate a specific type or types of SBOMs. And here's the tools you can use to do it. But I don't think we can start at, hey, package authors, start generating files and adding them to your package, especially in an ecosystem where people are paranoid about package size, until we've worked backwards from the actual use case, which is I have a thing that I ship and I need an SBOM for it, as opposed to a package like an application. And I don't know if I don't believe that work has been, or that research or whatever has been done.
All I can say is that's the hard job you're in the position to do is say what's reasonable and not reasonable. And like I said, you can start with first order, and the problem is you don't know how your package is going to be used. You don't know what APIs are going to be called. If you have a package that's a lot of exports, you don't know what parameters, how they'll affect the code path, and libraries are going to be invoked. That's why so start with source, and basically isolate the package and say, what are all the possible call graphs? What's the possible call graph of all possible things? And just give people information. Then if somebody imports that package into a higher order application, they should generate an SBOM as well that perhaps takes into account more intelligently what APIs are being called or what exports are being called. So the goal is at every level, we need to be able to provide as much information as possible. And there are pain points. Yeah, and there's going to be redundancy at different levels of usage where I create a downstream package, I import yours, and so on and so forth. And it gets, everybody's trying to create the full dependency graph, and it gets information overload. But that's where we're at right now. At every stage, if I look at the package in isolation, it's got to try to give me the best information possible to do some analysis.
Okay, so,
yeah, I guess.
And I'm saying that if you give them the same tools, and you tell them, hey, if you mature in your project after source SBOM, you want to create a installed SBOM, here's what you do. And this is where the tooling comes into play. If we recommend a certain tool like CDXGen or whatever it is, I don't know what we recommend for Python, that we actually help that upstream tooling be more intelligent about looking at Python applications in the context of the application that are being used. So these are things that we need to annotate, make note of, and maybe we ask OpenSSF or those projects like CDXGen, like Prabhu, the guy who owns that project, to help us do better with Python, right? Not Python, I'm sorry, JavaScript. I'm sorry, my brain's in Python because I'm all AI right now. So sorry. I totally apologize for the Python insertion.
Chris? Yeah,
we don't talk about Python here.
I wish I didn't have to.
I'm just joking to anybody that's watching live stream. So I just want to be really clear. You want from a JavaScript package maintainer you want them to generate an SBOM as part of their release and bundled with the release. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, my follow-on question to that is, who cares about that file? How is that file going to be used later? How does, like, so we work for IBM, where is IBM going to consume or care about that file in any way?
You don't know what you can do with it, and if you never produce it. So if it doesn't exist, no one will use it. You'll never, but the use cases exist for what it could be used for. As I keep pointing out that in CycloneDX, there are 24 use cases and growing, and there'll be ones coming up with cryptographic bills and materials. If you start including machine learning stuff, you'll have ML card data. If you don't produce it, you'll never attract the downstream users who need the information, right? So all I'm saying is that use case 0 goes back to, we're just trying use case 0 and 1, or create clear identities of your package dependencies. Try to make it a transitive graph. So use case 1 can be addressed, which is find vulnerabilities from PCERT or CERT perspective. And then we can you add maturity models. A couple of groups are working on maturity models for SBOMs. And so different recommendations or different profiles of SBOMs or different data will be looked at depending on what use case. Am I looking at it from an AI perspective? Am I looking at it from a government perspective? Are you using quantum safe ciphers? If you don't start producing the data and making it better and better and better over time, or create a process to do so, you'll never understand how it's being used.
Okay, that's fair. Jordan, I see your hand up, but just, I want to be clear. I think it's totally okay not to have all of the answers and have 100% of the picture. But I'm wanting just right now for like one example, one use case where that bundled SBOM would be consumed or looked at.
I'll tell you, we all work for IBM, and we have half a dozen SCA vendors looking to give us SBOMs and data. And hopefully if projects or packages start proactively producing what they say is their SBOM with confidence, maybe that'll be picked up by the package managers. And then that will be used as metadata these SCA tool vendors use, and we'll get better and better data and not rely on SCA vendor databases that are 10 years old.
So I think that's putting the cart before the horse. People who are unpaid, which is most of open source people, are not going to ever care about this stuff unless you make a compelling argument why they should. And like this, so this has to come like the other direction. And like package manager, people aren't going to produce SBOMs enough that NPM is going to be like, oh, because all these package authors are doing it, we should do it. They're already trying to add a SBOM generation. There's an OpenRF CPR to add it into NPM itself, but the intent is for applications to use it. And that was confirmed. Again,
it's not a whip them. This is the carrot.
Right.
Show them.
But that's what I mean is that the carrot that, let's say, IBM has is because it correlates to IBM's money, but there's no carrot for the people that aren't being paid by IBM.
Okay, I'm not talking. I never talk with IBM.
Yeah, I mean, replace IBM with any company, right?
So I'm talking about and then I've said this on past calls. I'm an open source developer. I maintain and create my utility, and IBM uses it, but I had to convince people on IBM to use it. I care more about the open source community and other people using it. Like I had issues open up by Sonatype because they want to use it. I care. I wrote it because I care about security and I care about people, and I'm giving them an SBOM, and they might appreciate using that. And I gave them the easy button. I've got a GitHub I use a GitHub action, use an open source utility to generate it. And if people want to run it, it's documented, it's automated, and people can run it. And that's all we're doing. We're giving them the easy button, and we're saying that this is not an annoyance. And if you just add this profile, this dot file to your repo, off you go, and it's automatic. And
yeah, I want to +1 to what Matt said. Many of our open source developers do get to do this in their day jobs. We wish there were more, but we do want to build the most secure open source projects in our community. Yeah. So, yeah, and I think it helps our projects be more competitive, have greater longevity, and everything else. So,
I definitely agree with what you just said, Robin. I just real quick, Matt.
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
No, I just like, it's not clear that this that adding another file to the package or another dot file to the repo, which by the way, a lot of people in the JavaScript community are screaming about the necessity to do that. So that's a huge ask, but like, it's not clear that it actually makes anything more secure. At the moment, the most compelling picture that can be painted is that it lets companies who contract with the government check off some boxes, and that's not necessarily more secure. So I think it needs to be clearly illustrated or described so that it's clear why and how it makes it more secure. And I don't understand how it makes it more secure yet.
I think it explains to governments what's going on. We have a lot of government inquiries about Node.js, for example, and we don't have, you know, those box to tick, any of those, you know, either security or even accessibility standards built in. It would be nice because when you have people like NASA using our stuff, you want to give them
for Node,
need.
I think it's a completely different kettle of fish because that's a platform, but it's not clear why an NPM package author, like, it's not clear how an NPM package author can make their package more secure or anything more secure by including an SBOM.
If it's a no-brainer and you import a dot package file and it happens automatically, why
people will be furious about adding a single extra file if they do not have a good reason why it needs to be there. So it's not a no-brainer unless
it's a choice.
there's an explanation.
It's a choice then. Let's make it easy to do. And if they choose not to, they choose not to. If they choose to do it.
Exactly.
We can do that, but
I created my utility in knowing that I have a direct competitor already, a .NET version called Cycle Index CLI, and we have overlapping functions. But I clearly state, you know, I really want my package to be used over that one because it's not as well maintained and doesn't provide a lot of the current functionality. So I'm incentivized that I want my work to be seen and not die on the vine. So it's an option. I chose to do it. The other projects will not choose to do it. But if you give them the easy button, I fully believe as security becomes to the forefront, especially with these things I mentioned in terms of machine learning and AI and quantum safe. And we're talking about new foundations being formed that were announced and all these companies making pledges. And, you know, the government's pushing towards, you know, closed source and licensing of AI related software and models. So, you know, if we want to preserve the open source ecosystem and we need to do some minimum things to make it easy for people to intuit downstream what's inside of our project, whether it be a package or simple package or library or something much larger.
I agree with that. I just think that there's a first impression thing here. We will burn a bridge when we ask maintainers to do something for free, and just making it easy isn't sufficient. And the minimum thing that I'm suggesting is required is an explanation of how it actually makes things more secure.
Well, there is no silver bullet for Jordan. There's no silver bullet for security. Yeah. We are charged with doing SBOM implementation. So let's do it, and let's do it as best we can.
Why are we charged with that?
Because it's what the industry is moving toward and the government is moving toward. And we make up a great part of the ecosystem that runs their organization.
Right, but so I get all that, but the fact that they're moving toward it is going to be irrelevant if we can't even explain why everyone wants to move towards it. And for the packages, right? Like, I'm not questioning it for applications, or for platforms, but like and I'm not trying to say we shouldn't have packages make SBOMs. I'm saying that if we want that to ever happen,
vulnerability,
we have to be able to answer that question.
To enable easier vulnerability reverse lookup. So you have all your identities plainly stated, and you're the project producing the SBOM, you verify that those are indeed your packages, so that when vulnerabilities get reported, that you can do a reverse lookup and we can detect more easily in a package if you might be affected by a vulnerability and you're part of a blast radius. That's use case one. That's use case one for the government. That's use case one for every major corporation.
Given that node modules is hoisting and that packages are not shipped as a atomic artifact, you can never do that with anything the package supplies. You always have to generate a lock file at the application level if you want to answer that use case. So I don't see any point of worrying about packages if you can never use their output anyway. And I think that I'm phrasing what Chris said, I think, differently.
It's about tiering. So you check security at every point. So if you claim, if you as a package author say, here are my full list of my dependencies and transit dependencies, and if I import you, I create my SBOMs are not just created once, and I'm not just using your source as the Bible or whatever it is. I'm going to generate my own in the context of my application. But if you produce one and I produce one and we have different results, that's a red flag. So it's security.
Every npm install will create different results for that, like every single one. It's not deterministic. So that right there, that will always happen. It will never indicate anything wrong.
I recommend we move on, because we have been charged and we will be doing an SBOM, solution initiative, whatever we're calling it. So let's move on, and we'll figure it out and do it well. Is there anything else on our agenda, Ben, unless you wanted to add one more thing on SBOM?
I do want to add one more thing.
Okay, add one more thing.
So I think when I think about a best practices document for SBOMs, right, there's going to be what I think is actually going to be a relatively short technical recommendation. But I think the more important thing is this introduction that will explain why we recommend doing this. And it's going to force us to work through these issues that we're talking about here. I think Jordan's points are very valid, right? Like this is tough for people who don't live this to understand why I should do this. I think Matt's got a lot of really good points, which is like, well, they need to understand why they need to do this, and here's the reasons why. So I would say that when we think about this document, the most important thing is going to be the explanation of why folks should do this. And so I think Jordan, that's going to be hard. But I think based on this conversation, I know it's going to be hard, but I think that's what we can really leverage maybe this group for more help on, is coming to a consensus around here's the why. Sorry, Chris.
Concise why.
Yeah. And I can't raise my hand, and then I'll let Chris go. But, I think that these are good questions and good things to work through, because people in the community are going to have these things. And so we're going to need to address them up front. There may be things that don't, it's non-deterministic on NPM installs. We'll have to call that out or whatever. We'll put it together so it's clear what we're trying to suggest and why, and we'll work through it. I think it's a good conversation though. Chris?
Yeah. So I think it's one thing to say, here's what we are expecting of, projects that are underneath the OpenJS Foundation umbrella. But I think, what Jordan's asking about is, and they're really good questions, is if you want the broad ecosystem to adopt this pattern and generate SBOMs and bundle it, you do have to have some answers on what's the value in doing it. Why should I, as a project maintainer, do this? And he's right. If you can't provide a compelling reason to do it, they're not going to do it. So it's something, we do need to think about if you want broad adoption of this pattern across the ecosystem.
Yeah, we do. I just want to internalize that we believe in it, and let's give some examples. And again, technology is all about choice, right? But yeah.
Yep.
I don't want to say we don't believe in it because we shouldn't be doing it, because I do believe in it. So
yeah, and to be clear, I'm not saying SBOMs are bad. I'm not questioning the utility of them at an application level. I'm merely trying to understand why anyone who's publishing a package would want to use them. And if I have that information, then I can write the summary, the introduction that Ben's talking about in the document, and then we can advance the cause of SBOMs. And if in fact we don't need to do anything there, then that advances the cause too, because then it's even easier. There's less work to be done. I'm just looking for a why.
And in that issue, to that end, what we want to prescribe there is just, here's the really easy, lowest friction way to generate this, to add it into your package. Maybe ideally provide some attestation using, Salsa or whatever, and just give them the keys to do it, and then why to do it, and how to, anything beyond that is something that project maintainers will have to decide for themselves, and hopefully we can steer them in the right direction.
Sounds good. And I want to just reiterate, I appreciate this conversation. I think some of these questions aren't easy, and sometimes you have to play devil's advocate and think about the community adoption and how they're going to respond to it. So the way we can approach it best.
And we do have opportunities to get feedback too, right? We have the W3C event, we have Bilbao, we have China. So we can be collecting data points, anecdotes, use cases for sure.
Yeah, and there's a ton we don't know. And I mentioned this, Jordan, last week when we were discussing it. I was like, we are at the beginning of this story. Like,
Mhm.
this is really early doors for all of this stuff, and especially when it gets into the attestations and provenance. So, you know, yeah, we're going to have a lot more questions than we have answers right now, I think.
Yeah, it's kind of like building an entire supply chain. No pun intended. We're building a supply chain, and we're in the middle someplace. So somebody's got to take a stand and saying, if we want electric vehicles, we got to build charging stations. You know, we don't know who's going to use them, or how many to put in, or, you know, if we're making them the right size or right voltage, but we're going to try. So we're going to try and enable the supply chain.
Cool. All right. And with that, we'll call it a wrap. We're at the end of the agenda and used up our time. So thanks, everybody. I'm guessing we will not have this meeting next week because a bunch of us will be in Bilbao. So we will reconvene in 2 weeks.
Sounds great.
Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.